Hi guys, I'm Mike.
And I'm Ash.
And this is F1 Fanatics. Welcome back, and today we start a new kind of little mini-series in preparation for the new season. If you're watching this and you haven't really watched F1 before, or your knowledge you're looking to expand it a little bit more, we're doing an A to Z of terms you might hear within Formula 1 and explaining what they are and what they might be used for in a sentence. Trying to help your guys understanding a little bit more as well. So Ash, we're starting off with obviously A, and I will say it, Ash will define it, and then I'll try and put it into a sentence. So first one, A is apex.
It's the middle part of the corner that drivers will aim to hit, which is basically meaning that they drive over that part, as it is the quickest way round that bend.
And in a sentence, you could say, Lewis Hamilton has clipped the apex nicely there to get a good exit from the corner. Moving on to B, and that is brake bias.
Now, in an F1 car, you are able to set your brake bias, which is effectively how much braking performance you get per front and rear wheels on the car.
So, in terms of a sentence, the probably best way to describe it is what it was heard last year with obviously the Renault controversy, is the Renault brake bias has a system that is being altered not by the drivers. So in that case it's meant to be the brake bias is adjusted manually. Theirs was being adjusted by some sort of algorithm, I believe it was in the end. Moving on to C, and that is chicane.
So a chicane is a tight left-right or right-left section of track, and it was used to combat speed. So it was usually put at the end of a long straight to slow cars down in an effort to aid safety, was the main reason for being brought in.
And in a kind of sentence, you'd probably hear it from kind of Crofty or Brundle in commentary, and they would be going, the driver is now approaching this chicane, it's going to be who's probably going to brake latest going into this corner. Moving on to D, and that is going to be downforce.
So downforce is the aerodynamic concept where the amount of air flowing over a car actually has the ability to force it towards the ground and to actually keep it there rather than taking off.
And so how you would hear that in a weekend is it might relate to a certain track, and so they might be talking about we're here at Singapore this weekend, we expect the drivers to be having a more high downforce setup on their cars, as obviously there is a lot of cornering, the most on the F1 calendar at this circuit this weekend. Moving on to E, and that is EERS.
So that stands for the Energy Recovery System. Now, the engines that are used in Formula 1 now are hybrids, and the Energy Recovery System is two components. It's your MGU-K and MGU-H. One of those will come up later. It's basically the recovery of energy from movement and heat to allow cars to have a little bit more power when being used.
And using this in a sentence, again probably heard on commentary, would be going, and as you can see the red light is flashing there, which means that they are harvesting energy to replenish their ERS. Moving on to F, and that is flat spot.
Now you'll hear this quite regularly over a race weekend, and it is where a car has been on the brakes too hard and it has effectively worn a flat part of rubber onto the tyres, and it usually causes quite a lot of vibrations.
And a sentence to go. Sebastian Vettel has locked up going into the corner, and oh, he has got a flat spot there. He has certainly ruined that set of tyres. Moving on to G, and that is graining.
So in the use of tyres across the race weekend, it's basically where a car is gripping to the track, and as the tyre is rotating and going across the surface, small grains appear on the tyre, and that's just where the rubber is starting to degrade and is starting to wear away. These are usually what you will see discarded across the side of the track, which people usually refer to as marbles.
So a sentence that you might hear over the course of a race weekend would be, Daniel Ricciardo's tyres are really starting to grey now. He's going to have to start thinking about coming on in for his pit stop very soon. Moving on to H now, and that is hands.
Okay, so it does sound like hands, but
Yeah,
it's
not
the
hands.
head and neck support device. So it's a piece of, well, it's part of the helmet and restraint area of the cockpit for drivers. So you'll see them their helmet being clipped in, and it's to lower the impact of G-force in crashes with head movement.
A sentence you might hear that used over the course of a weekend would be, Lando Norris is just attaching his hands device as he gets into the car ready to go out on his qualifying lap. And moving on to I, and that is installation lap.
Now, an installation lap is a lap that doesn't really mean a lot to spectators, but it's a lap where drivers go out, they test the functions of the car, just looking at the setup, different types of grip and where they can push. Usually for an installation lap they will not actually cross the finish line, so you'll see it a lot in qualifying where drivers then pull into the pit lane rather than actually going around and completing the lap itself.
There you go. And George Russell has just completed his installation lap there. Their team were just gathering a little bit of data there ready for him to go on his next lap. And now we're making quite good progress through this alphabet. We're now on to J, and that is jump start.
So this is where a driver starts to pull away from his grid slot before the lights have gone out and the race has officially started.
So a sentence you would have heard last season is, oh, and we're just looking back at replays here, and yes, Kimi Raikkonen has jump starts. He is certainly going to receive a time penalty for that. We then move on to K, and that is kinetic, a link to one of our earlier ones, I believe.
Yes. So it's the MGUK, it's the motor generator unit kinetic side of things. It's relating to the EERS system, and it is the with harvesting of energy related to movement, so that's the actual turning of the wheels.
So, a sentence you probably would have heard it in this season was at Sochi, where Sebastian Vettel suffered an MGUK failure, and you heard the team on the radio saying MGUK failure, stop the car immediately. So that's obviously what happened there. That's what they're talking about when they said it's an MGUK failure. You're like, why are they just saying random letters? And what does that mean? This is what it means. And then we move on to L and lockup.
Now, we've already mentioned it, but a lockup is where too much brake pressure is applied and the wheels actually stop rotating. So you can either have a full lockup, which is all four wheels and usually resulting in a flat spot, but mainly you'll see it where the front wheels are locking up. It's not that often that you get a complete lockup, really.
And usually you would hear this sentence probably in a relation to an overtake or defending. An example might be, Valtteri Bottas is going around the outside, he is attempting to kind of go into the corner and he is locked up and had to run wide at that corner. We now move on to M, and that is monocoque.
Now, the monocoque is a single piece of the car and it's where the cockpit is actually set. So it's the safety feature really that was brought in. It's mainly done so that it can withstand multiple impacts and actually is there for the safety of the drivers.
And now we move on to N, and that is Nomex.
So Nomex is a synthetic material that is used mainly in jumpsuits, gloves, things like that. It's fire resistant and was actually initially introduced into Formula 1 following the crash of Niki Lauda. It was something that was developed alongside other companies to get that safety feature brought in.
So it isn't probably a term that you'll hear too often, as quite luckily fires within Formula 1 aren't really a mainstay, especially after refuelling, but they might have been talking about when refuelling was discussed. You might have heard them going, you can see the mechanic is alight there after obviously he was set alight from a fuel leak from there, but luckily the Nomex synthetics has helped protect him from any serious injury in this incident. Moving on to O.
The word.
Oversteer.
Yeah, that's the one.
There we go.
Oversteer.
Blanked.
Oversteer is where the rear end of the car doesn't grip up as much as the front and effectively puts the car into a spin, and it's where the back end tries to almost overtake the front of the car, usually corrected with quite a lot of opposite lock, and then you'll see the car squirming a little bit as they correct it.
And would usually be used in commentary when describing a car in a corner. So an example might be Antonio Giovinazzi is oversteered into that corner. He has corrected it, but it has allowed Kevin Magnussen to close the gap, and he will now have an opportunity to overtake on the straight. We move on to the next one, and that is Parc Fermé.
So you will hear this every single weekend. It is basically where the cars are stored between sessions, in particular between qualifying and the race itself, because mechanics are not able to work on the car and make changes in between those sessions. If there are, it's usually for safety reasons, or it's closely inspected by an FIA official who will then feed back to the stewards as to whether a penalty is required.
And this is usually kind of discussed around about the qualifying time. And a sentence for that would usually be, we are now in Parc Fermé conditions. The teams can now make no further changes to the car. Let's get on with qualifying. And that leads us on quite nicely to Q being qualifying.
Qualifying is the session we have on a Saturday. It is broken into 3 sections and it sets the grid for the Sunday.
So it would literally just be, welcome guys, it is Saturday, which means it is qualifying, and we will find out by the end of this session who is on pole ready for the race tomorrow. R is for retirement.
Now this is where a car is unable to complete the number of laps required to finish the race, usually because of mechanical fault or due to a crash, but it's exactly that, the car doesn't finish the race.
And a sentence might be over dramatic by Crofty, being, oh no, is that smoke coming out of the back of his car? Oh no, he's going to have to. And that has led to Roman Grosjean retiring from the Grand Prix. Moving on to the next one, and that is S and slipstreaming.
So slipstreaming is where a driver is able to get behind the car of another, and they're in a nice little window where they're not having to go through as much of drag being generated by the air that they are going through. It does mean that they're able to close up nicely, and you'll see it mainly on the straights, especially in Azerbaijan.
And again, it is going to be one in commentary used mainly for overtaking. So an example would be, and Charles Leclerc has got into the slipstream of Max Verstappen. It has gotten him closer, and he now brakes to make a move to overtake. And we move on to T, and that is traction.
That's how much grip. That is how much grip the tyres are actually providing the driver. So you'll hear it mainly talking about how much tyre life is left and then being able to pull out of corners. So an example of this, it probably wouldn't be heard, well, it might be heard in terms of maybe a Martin Brundle describing things a little bit more, or maybe over team radio going, these tyres aren't providing with enough traction, we're going to need to change the tyres. Or someone in commentary might be going, they're going to need to look to change those tyres soon, they aren't getting much traction going into the corners. So we now move on to U, and that is undercut. This is the word that you'll see at pit stop strategy time, and it is where a driver behind will stop earlier than the car in front in an attempt to make better use of fresher tyres. So they'll use the tyres to try and close up on a car that has got tyres with less grip, usually used mainly when it's a pit stop strategy based race. So
yeah, and so key example probably would be from this year. It's Sebastian Vettel looking to perform the undercut on Lewis Hamilton, and oh, wait, is he going to get ahead of his teammate Charles Leclerc as well? Yes, Sebastian Vettel has successfully performed the undercut on both Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc. And we now move on to V, and that is virtual safety car. I'm not sure on this one, should we include the normal safety car in as well?
Can do.
Yeah, let's do that. Virtual safety car to start off with, though.
So the virtual safety car is basically where the drivers are limited to set sector times. It will be shown VSC is out, and what that means is that drivers have to slow down by 60%. I'm trying to think of the exact figure now. 60%, and it's just so that an incident can be cleared. It's used when it's not necessarily in the most dangerous of places and can be cleared quickly. The opposite to that is a full course safety car. Now that will be where you get the nice Mercedes coming out in front, driving at a slower speed, and all of the cars will bunch up behind it. This is used when it's going to take a little while to clear an incident, or a car has got stuck in a position where it will affect the safety. So this season we had, which one was it? It was the Kevin Magnussen one, wasn't it?
Yeah.
No, not Kevin. Yeah, what race was it? I can't even think now. But basically, at the end of the straight, Kevin Magnussen had gone into the gravel, and the safety car was brought out as there was a chance that another car could have had the same incident.
So an example of this kind of sentence would be, they are now bringing out the virtual safety car while they clear this incident. It is in a safe place, so they haven't been required to bring out a full course safety car. But yes, the VSC, it'll be interesting to see if anyone pits under these circumstances. We then move on to W, and that is wheelbase.
So the wheelbase of a car is dependent on the length between the middle of the front wheels and the middle of the rear wheels. And the length changes depending on manufacturer, but it also changes the characteristics of the car slightly and how it performs over a race weekend.
So an example of this will probably be heard early in the season, so this is probably quite a good one when they're talking about in testing or around the first couple of Grand Prix. There might be teams who've had a distinguished, we'll use Mercedes and Ferrari in this incident and say the Mercedes have got a much longer wheelbase than the Ferrari, and it seems to have worked well for them in the past. Be interesting to see whether this car provides the results that we've seen in previous seasons for them. That would be an example there. X is for X drivers, and we know technically that's EX, but X is a difficult letter. Let us off.
X racing driver, someone that doesn't race anymore within Formula 1.
So you obviously see a lot of the pundits on Formula 1 is just, yeah, they might go, here is ex-racing driver Nico Hulkenberg. He will be joining us this weekend to give his thoughts over the course of the race weekend. We then move on to Y. We're almost there, guys. 2 letters to go, and that is yellow flags.
Yellow flags are waved to warn drivers of something ahead. So it's usually used when there's debris on the track or there's been an incident. It'll be used conversely with double waved yellows as well. Basically, driver has to slow down for that sector, and they can't actually go racing at full speed until they have passed a green flag.
The main relevance of this probably comes in qualifying and can alter if someone crashes and pushed too hard towards the end of the lap. Yellow flags may be waved and they might go, and the yellow flags are out, and that has affected Sebastian Vettel's lap, and that is forcing him to not complete his qualifying lap. He will go out in Q2. He is the surprise exit from this session. We then move on to Z, and that is Zandvoort.
Another letter that was difficult to find a word for, but Zandvoort is the track in Holland where we are returning for the 2020 season. Max Verstappen finally getting a home race, if you don't include Belgium.
Yeah. So, Max Verstappen is coming to his first home Grand Prix at Zandvoort. The Orange Army are in full force here today. It is going to be a great atmosphere this race weekend. And that is your A to Z of F1. Hope you enjoyed them. If there are any that you would like to add, in the comments of A to Z. And what did you think of ours?
Mainly X and Z.
Mainly X and Z. That'll be funny to kind of see from there. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see if you felt any other terms, and maybe we can create a little glossary of terms in the comment section below. But Ash, what else can you do?
You can press the subscribe button. It means that our videos will go into your YouTube inbox, and you can also press the bell icon to get notified when one of our videos goes live. As Mike said at the start, we're going to do a couple of these videos just to give that introduction to Formula 1 for those that don't know about Formula 1 and have only just started watching it, or those that just want to have a refresher before the 2020 season starts.
And if you've liked this video, don't forget to let us know. Give us a thumbs up. And we enjoyed to kind of explaining a little bit more in terms of that. It helps us kind of as well in refreshing our own knowledge for you guys. We can't wait for the next one. But for now, you F1 fans, keep racing.